Pulse. Techno-horror is a genre that has existed for quite a while, but has ramped up in recent years over fears like AI and virtual reality. Fears related to new technology date back to, well, the first technology, with the optimists balancing out the skeptics and pessimists. Horror, in general, has often been a way for a creator to showcase a piece of the cultural zeitgeist at the time, such as with films like Godzilla being linked to Japan's terror of the nuclear bomb. Pulse is a Japanese horror film from 2001, being made right around the time when the Japanese were beginning to take a wide-scale interest in the World Wide Web. Its plot, however, has less to do with the internet as it does with ghosts invading the physical realm and the loneliness they might carry with them. Let's take a look. The film opens with a ship at sea as a young woman stares out at the dark water. She narrates that it all began one day without warning, and we flash back to the woman, Michi, who works at a plant shop. They're trying to get a hold of Taguchi, who is working on a computer disk for the shop's sale numbers, and they haven't heard from him in a week. One of her coworkers has a feeling that something is horribly wrong, so Michi decides to take a trip to his apartment to check in on him. He doesn't answer the door, so she finds a spare key nearby and heads in. While rifling through the apartment for the disk, she finds Taguchi, who apologizes for not responding. He seems fine and tells Michi where the disk is, but as she finds it, he stops responding. When she cautiously goes to the back of the apartment to check on him, she finds that he has hanged himself, although his body looks clearly decayed. She meets up with her coworkers and they lament his death, wondering why he did it, with Yabe stating that maybe he just suddenly wanted to die, as he gets like that sometimes. Later, back at the shop, they check out the disk, and amongst the spreadsheets of data, there's a photo of Taguchi's apartment showing a person draped in shadows standing near his desk. Zooming in on his computer monitor in the photo, they see the same scene depicted. Zooming in on a second monitor, they see a reflection of Taguchi's distorted face. We then cut to Ryosuke, who is setting up an internet connection on his computer for the first time, and is clearly having some trouble. Eventually, he manages to connect, and he's immediately greeted with a video feed of a person standing in the dark in an apartment. Ryosuke clicks on an arrow, and it moves to several other video feeds of people in their apartments. The footage thoroughly disturbs him, until some text pops up asking if he would like to meet a ghost, causing him to immediately shut off the computer. He dismisses it as stupid crap and goes to bed, but during the night, his computer turns back on and connects to the internet, showing another video feed of a man sitting in the dark with a plastic bag on his head. On the wall behind him are the words, "Help me," written over and over. Ryosuke wakes up and frantically turns the computer off again. The next day, in the computer lab in his university, he awkwardly asks a computer science student if a computer can dial up itself, but the student just says that it sounds like a hacker. He then says that the website asked him if he wanted to meet a ghost, but the student just dismisses it. Another computer science student, Harue, overhears him and asks him about the website and if he knows the address, although Ryosuke doesn't know what she means. He tells her that he doesn't really know anything about computers, and when she tells him to bookmark it the next time it pops up, he writes down her instructions on how to do so, as well as pushing the print screen key. We cut back to the plant shop, where Yabe receives a phone call in which a faint voice just repeats the words, "Help me." When Yabe looks at his phone, he sees the same image from Taguchi's disk on it. He decides to travel to Taguchi's apartment by himself and begins to rifle through his desk. While looking in the back, he finds a note that just reads, "The Forbidden Room." He then sees the spot where Taguchi hanged himself, now containing an ominous black stain. When he leaves and re-enters, he sees Taguchi standing there, but then realizes that he's just talking to the stain. He leaves the apartment, but in the parking lot, he notices a door sealed with red tape, and inexplicably tears the tape off and enters. He descends into a poorly lit basement area, and then turns to see a ghostly woman standing in the shadows. The woman begins to unnaturally move towards him as he falls to the ground in fear. He scrambles behind a piece of furniture as she approaches and looks underneath to see she's disappeared. When he looks up, however, he sees her face slowly peering over at him, and he screams. At the plant shop, Michi and Junko wonder where Yabe is, and Michi says that she's going to check on him, although Junko frantically convinces her to stay. Yabe eventually arrives, acting distantly, and mostly ignores the others. Cutting back to Ryosuke, his computer turns back on its own, showing the same footage of a man sitting in a dark room. Ryosuke quickly pulls out the instructions, but can't bookmark the page. As he presses the print screen key, the figure on screen moves closer to the camera, but stays shrouded in shadows, until Ryosuke frantically turns the computer off again, ripping out the power cord. In the computer lab the next day, he finds it empty, but sees a computer model showing a number of floating dots. Haruhi comes in, and he says that it came back again, with him managing to press the print screen key. She wants to come over and take a look at it, and Ryosuke asks her about the dots on the monitor. She explains that it's something they programmed, and that if two dots get too close, they'll die, but if they get too far apart, they're drawn closer. It's a miniature model of our world, but only the grad student who designed it understands it. She suggests not staring at it for too long. The two head back to Ryosuke's apartment, where she investigates his computer. She asks him why he got onto the internet despite not liking computers, and if he was hoping to connect to people, and he just says that everybody else is into it. She counters that people don't really connect, living lives separately, much like those dots. At the plant shop, Michi asks her boss about Yabe's behavior, and says that she wants to check on him. Her boss replies that it might be a waste of time, as words said in friendship with the best of intentions always wind up hurting your friends deeply. She decides to check on him regardless, finding him in a storage room in the dark. He continues to turn away from her and ignore her, until he says that he saw a horrible face in the forbidden room. She asks if that's the room with the red tape, and he exclaims for her to not go in there. He refuses to elaborate and just says that he's cold, before continuing to ignore her. Later, while walking home, Michi sees a woman standing on top of a structure before leaping off. Meanwhile, Ryosuke in the university library finds Haruhi reading a book on phantoms. She asks if he has a minute, and shows him the monitor with the dots again, now showing some of the dots to be phasing in and out of sight. She compares them to ghosts, but says that she doesn't know what they are. She also thinks that they're related to that creepy website that shows up on his computer. Afterwards, Ryosuke goes back to the library to read the book on phantoms, and notices a ghostly figure staring at him from amongst the bookshelves. A fellow student asks him if he also sees it, and tells him that he'll have to catch it to find out who it is. Ryosuke gets up and chases after the ghost, but it eludes him. He asks the other student what exactly that was, and the other student explains that the realm that spirits inhabit has a finite capacity, and eventually it will run out of space. Once filled, it will overflow to somewhere else, and the spirits have no choice but to ooze into another realm, our world. Maybe at first it started with something simple, but after many days or weeks, it finally happens. We see a flashback of a man taping off a room in which a spirit manifests. Later, the building is torn down, and it's implied that the spirit escaped through a modem into the World Wide Web. Now, spirits are manifesting everywhere, although when Ryosuke says he doesn't believe his stories, the student just apologizes and says that it's all hypothetical. Before Ryosuke leaves, the student says that If this really happened, there's no going back. Once the circuit is complete, it becomes permanent. At the plant shop, Michi's boss doesn't show up for work, and they can't get a hold of him. Junko decides to leave to go look for him, as Michi receives a phone call in which a voice just says, "Help me." She then enters the shop's storage room, appearing to see Yabe, but it turns out to just be a black stain on the wall. She hears a voice again just saying, "Help me," and she leaves the room. Junko, looking for their boss, finds a door in his apartment building taped off, which she enters. Michi discovers her sitting in the room, shaking in fear, and she tries to drag her out after seeing a ghostly figure nearby. The two manage to escape as the ghost reaches out towards Junko, but afterwards, in Michi's apartment, Junko appears to be cold and despondent. She repeats the phrase, "Help me," and cries as Michi tries to comfort her. When Michi goes to the store to pick up some groceries, she finds it completely empty and runs out after seeing another ghost. Ryosuke tries getting a hold of Haruhi, but fails, so he runs to the university, finding the computer lab completely abandoned. A monitor shows a video feed of the creepy website, with a man glitching out and repeatedly disappearing and reappearing. Ryosuke tracks down Haruhi's apartment, finding her in a despondent condition. She frantically says that they've all disappeared, and that she has to run away. Inside of her apartment, she calms down and says that she's always wondered what it's like to die, ever since she was little. She says that she was always alone, even though she had family. She thought that after you die, you'd live happily with everyone on the other side, but in high school it dawned on her that you might be alone after death as well. The idea was so terrifying to her that nothing changes with death, and she wonders if that's what becoming a ghost is about. Ryosuke tries to change the subject, telling her that they're alive, but she turns on a number of monitors, asking who they are. The monitors are all showing video feeds of ghostly figures in various homes. She asks who they are and how they are different from ghosts, and says that ghosts and people are the same, whether they're dead or alive. Ryosuke, however, says that he doesn't believe in ghosts, and won't believe in them even if he sees one. He knows that he's definitely alive, and so is she, so he doesn't want to think about death. He also suggests that they're going to invent a drug that prevents death, so they can live forever, a concept that Haruhi agrees with. She thinks that ghosts won't kill people, as that will just make more ghosts. Instead, they'll try to make people immortal by trapping them in their own loneliness. Back at Michi's apartment, she continues trying to feed and comfort the distant Junko. After Michi falls asleep, she wakes up to find Junko standing and looking out the window. She says that she's feeling better, but then asks if she's going to die like this. Michi replies that of course not, and Junko agrees, saying that she's going to keep on living all alone. As Michi prepares some coffee, Junko moves to stand against the wall, and when Michi turns around, she's disappeared, leaving a large black stain on the wall. Michi panics, calling out and looking for her, until a gust of wind from the window scatters the stain around the room, leaving no trace. Later, Michi tries calling her mother, but although the call connects, there's no response, prompting her to rush towards her mother's home. Ryosuke is at an arcade when he begins to look around, noticing that there's no one around. He rings a bell for service, but no one comes out, and he notices some shadowy figures moving around. He watches as one turns around to face him, remaining nothing more than an amorphous silhouette, causing him to run out of the building. He finds Haruhi outside, smashing things with a stick, and she tells him that she's scared to be alone. She wants him to take her somewhere, so they rush to the train station, finding it empty as well. They hop over the turnstile and get on a train, disturbed at how it's also completely empty. Ryosuke tells her that even if there's no one else, they are both definitely still here. This comforts her slightly, and the two fall asleep for a while, until they're jostled awake by the train stopping. Haruo panics that they're at the end of the line, but Ryosuke says that he'll check with the conductor. As he runs to do so, Haruo runs off the train into the night. He attempts to follow her, but immediately loses sight. We cut to her back in her apartment, looking at the video streams, including the man with the plastic bag on his head. Her printer then activates, printing out a sheet reading "The Forbidden Room," as she watches the man in the video remove the plastic bag and shoot himself in the head. The video stream then cuts to live footage of Haruo, and she gets up to approach where the camera would be. There's nothing there, but she smiles and says that she's not alone before embracing the invisible camera. Ryosuke arrives and rings her doorbell, telling her that they should live together so they're never alone. She doesn't answer, so he breaks down the door, finding the apartment empty. Later, he watches a broadcast listing off all of the missing persons, and he wanders the empty streets. He then finds Michi, whose car had broken down. She asks him what he's doing, and he doesn't have a response, while she tells him that neither of her parents made it. Ryosuke helps her fix her car, as the two share one of the first normal conversations they've had in days. She asks if he had any friends, and he says that he had one, maybe, but he doesn't know where she is. She tells him that he's got to find her and help her then, and volunteers to help him. The two drive along the empty streets back to Haruo's apartment, finding the words "Help me" scribbled across the walls. Michi notices an abandoned factory nearby, and the two decide to check it out. While wandering through it, they spot Haruo standing on a catwalk with a plastic bag on her head. When they rush upstairs, they find a roll of red tape and Haruo holding a gun. She proceeds to remove the plastic bag and places the gun down on a table. Ryosuke tries to tell her that they should all leave together, which she questions for a moment before picking up the gun and shooting herself in the head. Ryosuke tries to call an ambulance, but gets no response, and he and Michi eventually sadly exit the factory. When they try to start up the car again, they realize that it's out of gas, so Ryosuke says that he saw some gas canisters inside and he'll go grab them. While filling a gas tank, he notices a door that had been taped off which had opened on its own. The cap to his gas can falls and rolls inside, but when he cautiously goes after it, the door closes behind him. As he picks up the cap, a spirit manifests and states that death was eternal loneliness. Ryosuke tries desperately to leave, but the door doesn't budge. The spirit continues to approach him, as Ryosuke turns away and shouts that he refuses to acknowledge death. When he turns around again, the spirit is still standing there, and Ryosuke says that if he catches him, he'll disappear. When he charges at the spirit, it becomes physical, shocking Ryosuke and causing him to fall to the floor. The spirit states that it is not an illusion, and as it draws closer, the sound of a modem is heard. Michi eventually rushes in, finding Ryosuke sitting on the ground outside of the room next to a black stain. The two leave, with Ryosuke in a daze as Michi drives through the empty streets of Tokyo, spotting various bodies on the ground and fires lit. They arrive at the docks as Ryosuke is sleeping, and Michi breaks down in tears while looking at him. He wakes, and despite her saying that he went into the forbidden room, he says that he's fine. She asks if he wants to go back to what's left of Haruo to make him feel better, as she'll go with him, but he says that they should go as far as they can. The two get out and get onto a small boat, with Michi helping Ryosuke get in. She looks up to see an airplane on fire crash nearby, and the two leave, cutting back to the start of the film where Michi is standing on a ship looking out at the ocean. She narrates that death comes for us all, and maybe they would have been happier going with the rest, but they chose to keep going. One of the sailors tells her that they're heading for South America, where they're still getting some weak signals. She asks him if she's done the right thing, and he's confident that she has. She heads down to her room, where Ryosuke is sitting on the floor, although it then shows that he's also just a black stain on the wall. She narrates that she's now alone with her last friend in the world, and she's found happiness. Pulse is not a simple horror film, nor is it one that's going to appeal to a wide audience, but it's safe to say that it's in my top 3 of all time. I highly recommend people watch it for themselves, but as a simple explanation of the plot, spirits of the dead seem to be able to enter back into the physical world through the new technology of the internet. Their return brings with them the realization that the realm of the dead is nothing but eternal loneliness, causing them to reach out to the living any way they can. They're not malicious, and they don't want to kill anyone, but contact with these spirits causes people to lose their will to live, as they realize how dreadful and lonely the afterlife is. Dread and loneliness is exactly how I would describe the movie as well, and I can't overstate just how isolated and lonely the movie feels. The gray color palette, the slow pace, and the lack of humans, even in many scenes where one would expect to find other people. It's an exemplary showcase of existential dread, and was meant as a metaphor for how the new technology of the internet would likely only serve to isolate and separate us as a species, despite its intentions of connections. While other horror movies might have focused more on the ghosts, their impact on society, and the breakdown of that society, Pulse takes a closer look at the internal despair and loneliness that the living are already experiencing. Like I said, it's a slow film, as evidenced by the length of this plot summary, but if you're interested in horror movies for less cheap thrills and more existential dread and despair, Pulse is second to none.